Good evening, and thank you again for joining us for the City of Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks Park Needs Assessment virtual community meeting. If you would like Spanish interpretation, you can click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and click on Spanish.
Muy buenas tardes y gracias por su participación en esta reunión virtual de la evaluación de las necesidades de los parques. La reunión de hoy será interpretada simultáneamente. Si desean oír esta reunión en español, vayan al globo terráqueo en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla y ahí escogerán su idioma de preferencia, en este caso español.
Thank you. We also have closed captioning available. If you would like to view the captions, you can click on the CC or Show Captions icon at the bottom of the screen to have the captions showcased on the bottom of your screen. And now I'd like to introduce Jessica Henson with Olin for the presentation.
Thank you, Christina. Good evening and welcome, everyone. We're really glad that you could join us here on this Tuesday evening for our virtual community update for the Parks Needs Assessment for the City of Los Angeles Department of Recreation and Parks. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. And wanted to let you know that we are recording tonight, so this will be available online for anybody that misses it. We also have posted the slides online, and we'll put those links in the chat. So if you want to study any of the materials, you'll be able to. Many of you are aware that the LA 2025 Parks Needs Assessment was directed by Council for the Department of Recreation and Parks to update. The last time we did a Parks Needs Assessment for the City of Los Angeles was 2009, so we're due for an update based on the latest community feedback and priorities. And really excited that you are all here because community feedback is really foundational to the outcome of this assessment and how Recreation and Parks will prioritize investment and stewardship of our parks over the coming decades. And it really all stems from community input and involvement. And we've had a really wonderful time so far this year hearing from communities and understanding what those needs are. I can start by celebrating the fact that the City of Los Angeles parks are incredibly popular. Every year, millions of people use our park system, from the largest parks like Griffith Park all the way down to our community and neighborhood parks that are such an important part of so many of our lives. And we really have seen this as we've been out talking to different communities. Our parks are really beloved, and people consider them part of their well-being in their day-to-day life. Tonight, we're going to give an introduction to the project. Some of you might have seen before, but we want to make sure everybody has that information. We'll give an engagement update. We'll talk a little bit about economics of the park and how we're working on the site-based evaluation. We'll also give some opportunities for how you can get involved and what some of the next steps are. You can follow along, as we mentioned before, in Spanish on these slides, but also on the website if you want to follow along in Korean, Mandarin, or Armenian. Those languages and the slides are also available, and we'll put those links in the chat too for anybody that wants to follow in those languages. The website can also be translated overall into 10 different languages, so we hope that there will be a great way for everybody to be able to engage. We're going through a 4-step process this year across 2025. This is a great night to be joining us if you haven't been following along, because we're really in the heart of what we call the evaluation phase. So early this year, we did grounding. We asked a lot of communities different questions, did a lot of mapping exercises, and now we're really evaluating that feedback and hearing whether or not we got that feedback right so far. So tonight you'll see a lot of survey results that we've heard so far, and it'll be interesting to hear if they align with your expectations or if you have different understandings or different opinions. By September, we're going to have a draft of the needs assessment, and then we're headed toward a final by the end of this year. You may already know this, but the city owns, operates, or maintains over 500 park sites around the city of Los Angeles. There are nearly 100 miles of trails, and all of this is on 16,000 acres of land. It's an incredibly varied system that touches all of the neighborhoods around our city. I really love this graphic. If you've been following along this year, you've seen probably before. This is all of the parks in our system organized by the largest to the smallest. And while you can see some of our like large iconic parks like Griffith, Sepulveda, or Hanson Dam up here in the upper left, the vast majority of our park system really are community and neighborhood parks that are just part of our everyday lives, where we play baseball, where we hang out with friends or family, birthday parties, or other sort of recreation, or just, unplug and at the end of our day for a walk. And that's really part of the critical infrastructure of our lives. We have an incredibly varied park system in Los Angeles, one of the most unique really across the country, because in addition to swimming pools and senior centers and recreation centers and other recreation fields that you see in a lot of communities, we have very unique things like equestrian centers. We also have kids camps that are in the mountains. We have the Griffith Observatory and the Greek Theater that are part of our park system. It's really like a completely unique system across our city and brings a lot of joy to the city. You don't need to be able to read this necessarily on the screen, but if you would like to study it later, we'll make sure that you can access those slides. But we've really been studying as we've been moving through this process what community feedback directly relates to what Rec and Parks can do as an entity acting alone versus where they need to collaborate with the council or other departments in the city. And this is really important as we sort the feedback from communities as part of this needs assessment so that we can make sure that feedback is getting to the group that can actually make it actionable. So sometimes Rec and Parks they control and maintain park facilities, but they coordinate, for example, with council on certain ordinances. Or when we look at how that breaks down into different budgets, in some cases, city planning works to assign budgets to groups. So how do we hear what we're hearing from the community and then filter that into how Rec and Parks can actionalize that or how they might need to partner to actionalize that information? All of this is coming together to identify current and future needs, challenges, and opportunities across the city, recognizing that this is not one size fits all. And in fact, I can guarantee you, I've spent most days for the last few months in different communities around our city. And I can tell you that while there are a lot of things that communities have in common, not every community has the same priorities. So we need this to reflect the diversity of our communities across the city of Los Angeles and to help guide that future investment. Communities have told us it's not always clear or transparent why certain funding happens in certain places. And so the purpose here is to make sure that information from the communities can help inform decision making into the future. So we're looking at a 25-year timeline and how that feedback can really impact Rec and Parks. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Lauren here to talk about the next few slides.
Thanks, Jessica. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools and sort of set up some of the interesting graphics and findings that you'll be hearing in the rest of this presentation. But suffice to say that we're working at multiple scales at once. To Jessica's point a few slides ago, one size does not fit all in Los Angeles, particularly in a city like Los Angeles. Things in the valley may or may not be true in San Pedro. And so what's really important to us is working at these two scales. First, the high level, really digging into innovative tools and criteria that we can use to understand the complexity within our system and within our city and use state-of-the-art data sets to be able to do that while still marrying that with the on-the-ground lived reality of everyday Angelenos and understanding what is the most important to them. Next slide. And so to talk a little bit about this, the data sets that we're using, and you'll hear much more about this as we start going through the entirety of the presentation, but we are looking at everything from social equity indicators to climate indicators, both for our current moment, but also looking 25 years and further into the future, and thinking about also sustainability and environmental indicators across the entirety of Los Angeles. Next slide. But like I said, local geographies and lived realities are really the core of how we all relate to our local neighborhood parks. The parks that, as Jessica was saying, are the places that we, connect with family, connect with our neighbors, and, enjoy all of the many, many benefits that parks have. So if we think about how to start coming up with a plan for all of Los Angeles, obviously it's quite complicated, but we've been thinking about it at multiple scales. The first being at the scale of an individual park or neighborhood. The second is thinking about it in council districts. So you'll see many of the data sets are looking at per council district, or the survey data that we have looking at per council district. But then we're also looking regionally. What could make sense for the west side versus the sort of central and east parts of LA? What makes sense for South LA and for the Valley? And so this is sort of the basis for how we're breaking down different types of data. And so I'm going to take a second to talk about what we're calling park pixels. You're probably like, what the heck does that mean? But you'll be seeing this kind of graphic throughout the presentation. So I think it's helpful to just talk about it a little bit further. What we did is we assigned a pixel, or as you can see on the left, sort of a small square for every single park in Los Angeles. And then we scaled it so that any parks over 100 acres had the sort of medium-sized square, and any parks over 1,000 acres have the largest square. And so you can start to see how you can help orient yourself within Los Angeles, looking at places like Griffith or Elysian. And one of the reasons why we did that is because if you look on the left and you think of that graphic that had all the different parks, many of the neighborhood parks get lost when you look at the scale of Los Angeles in these data sets. But when you start to visualize it with the park pixels, you can start to get this general idea for how all of that data is kind of visualizing itself across the city. And it's a much more helpful tool for understanding where are there areas that we need to focus, or where are there areas that are different from others. And so now I'll pass it to my colleague, Chris, to talk about engagement.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I appreciate your continued interest and commitment to this effort. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on the engagement process. We like to start with this slide that public engagement is foundational to the project. We need to hear from you to be able to do our work. And so the next slide talks a little bit about big picture, kind of 3 different ways that we've been convening both communities and leaders. So at the community engagement level, what we're doing tonight is really this outreach, that purple circle. We've also created a technical advisory committee that's really a group of nonprofits really in the park and open space kind of spectrum to really come together, understand their immediate needs, but then also been working through a steering committee of multiple folks within the city family and adjacent agencies to also be coordinating the work within the city of Los Angeles that needs to happen for this project to be implemented. So there's 3 different work streams to the engagement process. There's the community engagement, this technical process, and then the steering committee, each with different milestones throughout this year. So this slide talks a little bit about all the different ways that we've been trying to reach folks just like you. So we've been doing virtual meetings like this. We've put out press releases. We've created videos and media kits. We've had in-person meetings. We have interest groups, a kind of wide range of trying to meet folks where they are. And so these are some images of some of those meetings. We've met at over 26 facilities across the city, and really geographically trying to cover all of Los Angeles, which we all know is a tall task. So this is a bit of a summary of some of the places we've been. But in addition to the meetings, we've also been going to other events where we know folks are just gathering and folks that are committed to parks. So we've been at Ciclavia, we've been at workshops with nonprofits and maker fairs, really trying to tell the story about what the park system could be. We've also done a lot of marketing within our park system. We've created banners throughout the city of Los Angeles. We've created fact sheets so people could understand what we're doing. And we made sure to translate that into as many languages as possible. I know what we're talking about tonight is kind of dense and in the weeds from a policy perspective. So something that we've done is make these really fun, simple videos. They're up on YouTube that tells the story about the Park Needs Project. And so I'm sure we'll circulate a link. And that's something I send to my friends. It's like, just watch this. You just watch this in a few minutes and you'll understand what we're trying to get at. Next steps, number of meetings and convenings coming. So there's going to be work with Proclama Beautiful, work with Ciclavia, outreach within specific communities happening as we go deeper on the project. One piece of this project that we believe is really critical to get right is understanding there are particular communities across Los Angeles that might otherwise be left out of this process unless we really focus. And so we call these equity groups. So there's 4 groups we've been convening. So what we've been doing is pulling together leaders from CBOs and nonprofits and city agencies that really speak to these very focused needs of critical social services, parks in place, accessibility, and really thinking about parks as the public stage. We've also put together a series of flyers and social media kits to make sure that people know there are opportunities to tell us the need and help us shape the future of the system. We most importantly have not forgotten ways to reach our youth. We actually even created a whole coloring book, which is pretty darn cool, I might say. And that's been a way for youngsters coming to our events to actually engage themselves and be part of the process. Surveys, a critical part of the project. And I believe I'm handing it over to Andrew now. Here we go.
Yes, thank you, Chris. So we wanted to share a little bit, from what we've heard so far, just to give you a flavor of some of the responses that we've gotten. So we did conduct a statistically valid survey, which went to a random sample of residents across Los Angeles. We got over 1,000 responses to that. We got nearly 2,400 responses to our short online survey, and then 1,700 responses to our full online survey. So across our online surveys, we got responses from people across generations and also from our in-person engagement. You could see kind of all of the different generations represented here. In addition, we asked people how long they lived in LA. You could see actually quite a bit of representation from those who have lived in LA at least 15 years or more. We also asked people to describe LA park and recreation facilities in 3 words, and you could see some of the words that stand out here. The biggest ones were the ones that were mentioned the most. You could see fun, community, necessary, but also dirty, outdated, and old. Just to make sure that we're showing the same word cloud in Spanish, you could see some of those similar words popping out. We also asked people to describe their favorite Los Angeles park and recreation memory. And these are just a few of them. We got some really great responses to this. But the responses very frequently talked about exciting activities that people do in the parks and who they do it with. So you could see leading a bird walk with the group, playing soccer as a kid, swimming in the summer with meeting their friends, or taking their kids to tennis classes. In terms of some of the more quantitative responses, we asked people if they felt that there were enough parks and recreation centers within walking distance of their home. So on the left is the response from the statistically valid survey. You could see a little bit less than half of people said that they thought that there were enough parks and recreation centers within walking distance. Those little colored tick marks show the different responses that we got broken down by different regions of the city. And you can see that actually the responses were very similar across all the different parts of the city. And we're comparing those results from the statistically valid survey to the online survey results on the right and the results from the in-person engagement. You can see across all 3 different forms of surveying, it was very similar. A little bit less than half of respondents felt that there were enough parks and rec centers within walking distance of their homes. We also asked people how they would rate the physical condition of parks. So you could see on the left, almost 2/3 of people in the statistically valid survey said that they thought parks were in excellent or good condition. A little bit more variation by the regions here, but still pretty close together, between 61 and 73% of people agreeing that they were in excellent or good condition. On the right-hand side, you could see that this was one of the questions where we got slightly different responses between the statistically valid survey and the people who filled out the online survey or came to our in-person course about the conditions of the parks, only 40% excellent or good, and the in-person engagement even less, only 19%. We asked a similar question about how people would rate the physical condition of rec centers. And you could see here about 59% said in the statistically valid survey, excellent or good. Compared to the online survey, again, people felt a little bit worse, the people who decided to show up to the online survey, only 37%, and the in-person engagement, 24%. We also asked in the online survey whether there was a park or recreation facility in LA where you feel safe. That's the one on the left, and park or rec facility where you feel like you belong, and that's on the right. You can see over 80% of people felt that there's a park in the city where they feel safe, and 3/4 of people said that they feel like there is a park or rec facility where they belong. We also asked people about the most important facilities to them. So starting with outdoor facilities, people said that unprogrammed green spaces were the most important. That came up as number one in the statistically valid survey and also in the online survey, followed by natural areas and wildlife habitats, paved multi-use trails, and also non-paved multi-use trails. So you'll see that the big percentage numbers are from the statistically valid survey, and then the numbers in the corner say what number that was in the online survey. That's the orange, and the in-person engagement in green. So what I take away from this is that even though there's some disagreement about the order, people pick the same top things across all the different survey methods. Moving on from outdoor facilities to indoor facilities, the top facilities that people said were important to them and their households were swimming pools, exercise and fitness equipment, walking and jogging tracks, and weight rooms and gyms. And again, you could see swimming pools were number one across all of the different methods of surveying, and exercise and fitness equipment were mentioned in the top 4 across all of them as well. In terms of the programs that are most important to people and then to people who responded to the survey and their households, fitness and wellness programs was the top in the statistically valid survey, followed by special events and festivals, nature experiences or environmental education, and then arts and crafts classes. And you could see nature experiences was mentioned, among the top in all of them. And fitness and wellness and special events were also in the top in the in-person engagement. We asked people if they felt that recreation or parks facilities were always available to them when they want them. And about 3/4 of people said that they agree that they are available when they want to use them. Again, if you look at the regional breakdown, very similar results across all the different regions of the city. On the right-hand side of the slide, we asked people what prevents them from using park and rec facilities or programs more often. The number one response to that we got was people experiencing homelessness there, followed by being too far from their residence. Then they didn't know where to go or what's offered, and followed by facilities that are not well maintained. We also asked people how supportive they were of additional funding, so an increase in tax or levies to fund the types of parks and rec centers that are most important to them. You could see that a majority of residents supported a bond or some increase in taxes or levies to fund those facilities. A little bit more variation in the region, but still a majority of people supportive. In the statistically valid survey, we saw 58% of people say that they were supportive or very supportive. In the online survey, that went up to 63%, and in in-person engagement, that was 70% of people.
So we're taking a lot of that feedback and we're working as we start into some of the technical topics here to make sure that we're listening to what we're hearing from people and then also providing some information and data for decision making. So one of the things that the Board of Recreation and Parks Commissioners said in January at the outset of this project was if we're going to be asking people what they want to see for the next 25 years, we should be transparent about the last 25 years and where we've been. So for that, we've been doing a park economics deep dive to really set that baseline of understanding. And there's a series of steps that we're going through to evaluate the budget and staffing data. We're benchmarking that against other peer cities, identifying gaps in the existing funding. We're looking at cost estimates for annual operating costs as well as capital costs for new projects or upgrades or picking up deferred maintenance, and then identifying potential funding sources. So to start with some good news, over the last 25 years, we've added over 1,000 acres of parkland to our park system. That's good because we are still a growing city, and with that growth comes additional park need. Per capita, we have, a big need to continue to increase our park acreage. We're looking at how that system has been funded and then how it will be funded into the future. On the left here are all the ways that the park system gets funding today, and we'll talk in a second about how that will change over the next few years on the right. So there's the City of Los Angeles budget. There's Prop K, which was passed in 1996 by voters. It was a 30-year measure to provide capital funding for projects, for new projects, as well as O&M dollars for those new projects. Again, that will sunset next year. Measure A, which was passed in 2016, that's a county measure for all of Los Angeles County funding parks improvements. There's state and federal funding. There's Quimby and park fees. Those are fees that developers pay when they develop or build a more than 50 unit building. There's other agency funding, for example, when Rec and Parks partners with the Department of Water and Power or LA SAN. There's philanthropic dollars, and then there's Play LA dollars. Play LA is an investment that was made on behalf of LA 2028 and the International Olympic Committee to help offset costs for recreation programming for children in the years building up to the 2028 Olympics as part of the legacy of the Games, offsetting pretty significantly the costs of enrollment in recreation facilities, especially for communities in need. That will also expire in 2028. So that will have a big impact on program dollars. Prop K, which we've relied on for the last 29 years and sunsets next year, we've relied on significantly for our capital improvements across the park system, and that will end next year. So as we look into the future, we hear what we've heard from the surveys of what people want to prioritize in terms of programming as well as facilities. We're looking at these budgets. So for the next few slides, I'm just going to sort of highlight a few things that we have here on the left, starting with the city budget. The operating budget for Rec and Parks comes really from three sources. One is the city charter property tax revenue allocation. This is dollars that property owners in Los Angeles pay that goes to the park system. We've actually had a charter allocation for over 100 years or so. So this has always been something for a very long time that Angelenos have invested in our park system. There is some earned revenue that comes into our park system. This is dollars, for example, like associated with rentals or permit fees that help offset some of those costs. And then historically, the City of Los Angeles General Fund has also made a contribution toward the park system. So remember these green colors? They're now a bar chart here on the left. So that city charter property tax revenue allocation, that's about $278 million annually. About $57 million of the budget is earned revenue. And then in 2025, there was a $13 million general fund contribution. How that gets spent is here on the right in the orange and red colors. About $91 million goes to programming, $131 million to maintenance, $34 million to administration, and $92 million goes back to the city general fund as a reimbursement for utility costs like water and power, as well as staff benefits and pensions. So these sort of numbers, as we're tracking that $348 million overall, we're going to now see it in the next slide over a course of years. So in 2008, around the time of the Great Recession, the city of Los Angeles kind of changed how the budgeting for rec and parks and some other departments worked, and started requiring that general fund reimbursement. That's the color in yellow. As you can see, that color in yellow has grown to be a pretty significant proportion of the recreation and parks budget. The blue numbers here, which is the labor and service labor and non-labor expenses that Rec and Parks has actually not kept up with inflation if you're just looking at that number, that Rec and Parks has to sort of do the day-to-day work. And the general fund reimbursement is making a really big impact on the ability of Rec and Parks to keep up. We're looking at how that compares to some other cities around the country. Some of you that might be park advocates may follow the Trust for Public Land and their park score data that came out in late May. Unfortunately, the city of Los Angeles has dropped to number 90 out of the 100 cities that the Trust for Public Land ranks nationally. We are behind. We got to catch up. Right now, one of the reasons that we have here is our parks funding is significantly less than some of our peer cities. So here on the left, you can see we're spending about $92 per capita, where other cities that are either comparable population or regionally, or Washington, D.C. is sort of a national standard as an aspirational park system, we are considerably less. In addition to looking at the budget numbers, we've been looking at capital funding. That means projects like new projects or replacement projects or upgrades or, projects that help address deferred maintenance issues. And we've been putting them into sort of different buckets. These are some examples of projects that have been completed over the last 25 years. And we've put them into small, medium, large, extra large project sizes. By and large, there are a lot of little projects happening, and you might have noticed this at your park system. Small projects for heating and cooling upgrades or small repaving projects that are happening. Those are sort of always happening, and there's a ton of them happening across the 500 park sites in the city at any given time. There are a lot fewer big projects that are happening over the last 25 years in our park system. We've also been looking at how that relates to where we're seeing that funding distributed along the city. And so this is that park pixel map that Lauren presented earlier. So you can see, sort of squint at it and see the city overall. More than half of parks have received funding over the last 25 years for some sort of capital improvement. And that number goes up depending on, if you include different grants and things like that. So we are seeing investment happening in our parks. We're looking at how that has been split up between different areas of the city. So over the last 25 years, for example, the South and the Central East had slightly more. If we break that down a little bit more, for example, the orange here is just the last 7 or 8 years. The Valley and the West got a little bit more. Why does this matter? This matters because as we look to the next 25 years, we want to make sure that there's equitable distribution of stewardship of parks around the city. And so understanding where we've been, what has had recent investment, is really important as we look to the next 5, 10, 20 years, where places might still need investment. We're taking all of this information, the knowledge that we're gaining from various surveys around the city, combined with firsthand accounts and a lot of the conversations like Chris mentioned, where we're having very detailed workshops and sessions. And we're bringing that together with a lot of this budget information to do this prioritization exercise of parks around the city. And it's really a 3-step process that we're going through. And I'll go through each of these, what we're calling determine universe of sites, prioritization, and then identifying tools. So the first step, which is determining the universe of sites, which I love, universe of sites is such a fun thing to say, has really 2 big components. One component of that is all of our existing parks. We know where they are. We can label and find each of those existing parks. They are one of our existing park sites. There's also parks that, we may may come online in the next 25 years. So just like we've added 1,000 acres of parkland over the last 25 years, we assume that we will continue to add parkland over the next 25 years. And in fact, in some neighborhoods, we really need to add additional parkland. Some neighborhoods, because of increasing density, need additional parks, and some neighborhoods just have literally never had enough parks. So part of what we've been working on is an innovative way and approach to quickly identify areas that need new parks around the city so that they can be part of this universe of sites that we're considering for investment around the city. Right now, there's something like 700 to 800,000 Angelenos that live without a park within a 10-minute walk of their house. And if we look at population projections, by 2050, if we do nothing to address that, 117,000 more people will live without a park within a 10-minute walk of their house. So when we think about this universe of sites, we're thinking about the parks we already have and the parks that we need to be thinking about for our communities in the coming decades. The second piece of this is to prioritize sites. And so we've been listening to community feedback for a few months now about what is important to you and how we maybe would have prioritized investment in the 1980s or the 1990s isn't the same yet. We've actually heard that from a lot of communities as they've reflected on some of the Prop K investment priorities that, 30 years later, how are we thinking about that? So what is a system of prioritization that makes sense for today and can also make sense in 5, 10, 15 years? And so some of the things that we've heard from people relate to the current physical condition of their parks, the walkability, the assessment of different like shade metrics, biodiversity of plants, how many native species of trees does the particular park have? We've heard a lot about water being more resilient with our water use and infiltrating and getting more water into our groundwater. Thinking about climate vulnerability and park safety, as well as access to transportation and things like walkability. So this is just a draft list of what you're seeing. I mean, it's still evolving with community feedback and with review by technical experts and other departments in the city. But what we're trying to come up with here is what are some of the things we need to be thinking about that communities are interested in as we think about investment in our park system. Here's just an example of some of the ways that we're looking at this evaluation framework. Some of you might be familiar with Echo Park. This is a little piece here showing Echo Park. This is downtown LA, if you're familiar, the 10 and the 5 and the 110 here. We're looking at some data on the scale of the park, for example, like the facilities condition assessment. We literally have, and I can show you during the Q&A, assessments for the 500 park sites around the city of what condition like the rec center or the baseball diamonds are in. In some cases, we're looking at data on the scale of the walkshed, a 10-minute area around that park. Some of the data we're looking at it based on the zip code and some of it based on the council district. So each of those layers help inform specific feedback for each of these parks. And all that feedback also relates directly to what Andrew was presenting related to the survey results. So that statistically valid survey with, geographically and demographically representative around the city and in each council district helps us to actually see, pretty localized what people feel about their park system. So how do you perceive the condition of the parks in your neighborhood? What are some of the priority amenities for that particular area of a city? And they're not the same across the board, although there are some alignments, as Andrew mentioned, in some of the top choices. And then finally, the last step that we're going to be going through as we move towards September in the draft plan is identifying potential tools. So when we say a potential tool, not every park needs a new facility. Like some people have said at community meetings, look, I just want our existing community center to be better maintained. So in some cases, the tool may be a better operations and maintenance strategy or budget for a facility. In other cases, it might be a new park. In other cases, it might be expanding or adding an amenity. It could be planting, reforesting a native forest. So those sort of things are different depending on what each of these parks needs. It's not one size fits all. So when we get to September, we'll have that draft assessment for public's comment and to look at and see how different tools might make sense for different needs. Just to give you a sense of what's upcoming, you can check out the website at any time. I know Sarah's been dropping links into the chat. Totally check it out. Each week there's stuff coming up. In the next week we'll be at the Lotus Festival, for example. If you want to come out there, there are additional survey questions that if you did a phase 1 survey, there's some new questions you can answer on the website as well. And we really do hope you'll tell your friends, families, all of these people about the Parks Needs Assessment, because we really want to make sure that we're representing different needs around the city. We're also going to take some Q&A here in real time. If you need to step off, we totally understand that it's Tuesday night at 6:45. But Christina's been keeping questions, and we'll jump in with a few of those. And my colleagues, Chris, Andrew, Lauren, and others from Rec and Parks are here to answer them as we can. Thank you. Oh, and I should have said, and Christina might explain this as well on the screen now, are some different ways, and I'll let Christina explain how you can get your questions in.
Sure. Thank you to those who've already been putting questions into the chat. The Q&A feature is at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A, and you can submit questions through that. If you are calling in, you can also text questions to 213-290-0277. Again, that's 213-290-0277. If you'd like to submit a question via text, that is the phone number. So we will get started with the questions. Feel free to post them as they come up, and we will go in the order that they were received. So the first question that we have here is, could you give an overview of the RAP Park Monitor program?
Sure. Actually, it might be better if Daryl or Jeremy, do you want to do an overview of the RAP Park Monitor program? Or I can jump in too, if not.
This is Daryl. Sorry. Maybe if the person who asked the question could clarify which park monitor program they're talking about, the field monitoring program or something separate, and then I can of course chime in.
Great. Thanks, Daryl.
Okay. We can come back to that.
Maybe they could put a little more detail if it's a specific, if they're referring to an overall program or a specific park program. That would be great. Great.
Okay. There was a question about park data. Will there be a category for public parks hosting city-funded interim housing for homeless, since there is more than one such park?
It's a great question. So the question was if there's interim housing, for example, bridge housing that's near Friendship Auditorium near South Griffith is one example for those that are less familiar, where temporary interim housing for persons experiencing homelessness is there. Right now, some of those are operating under temporary conditions, temporary emerging conditions that have been extended. Right now, there is not a park classification for those, but it's certainly one of the categories of conversation we've been having. So I guess, yes, it is a category of something we've been talking about. I'd be very interested to hear from that person if they want to put something else in the chat about their viewpoint, maybe if they want to add a secondary question or comment, be interesting to hear.
The next question, how can someone be a part of the steering committee or technical advisory committee?
Great question. I will show you those right now. And actually, this is a great opportunity to show off the website. I think I'm still sharing my screen. If you go to Parks Needs Assessment, which is needs.parks.lacity.gov, you can check out some of the different tabs about different groups. So the steering committee here, which has a lot of groups that are parks advocates groups, say like the Trust for Public Land, is here, and you can check out, when they're meeting. Similarly for the TAC, which is groups that are city departments, for example, generally speaking. And they're coming up, they're going to have a meeting. Actually, we just set the meeting, so it's no longer TBD. So the website will probably be updated tomorrow morning. But I believe that day is going to be August 14th. Somebody can maybe correct me on that if it's misspeaking. But if somebody is an eligible department and wants to join, the easiest thing to do would be to drop us an email. We'll put the email in the chat, and the steering committee, the info is up here. If somebody feels that they're a group that belongs in one of these groups, let us know. And you can connect to us via many different ways. We'll get you the email in the chat, or you can check out trying to find the tab that gets me to the email address. Oh, but it's already in the chat, so you don't need me to do that. But it's in the chat, LA City Parks Needs at theolinstudio.com. And certainly welcome if folks feel that their group should be represented there.
Great. The follow-up to the RAP Park Monitor program was monitors at local parks working in the summertime only to address do's and don'ts in the park. How do you become a monitor?
This is Daryl. I'll chime in here, I think. So just to speak directly, there's not a particular position that responsibility is solely to do's and don'ts in the park. I know that's something that I think the team spoke about that we've heard a lot, particularly the equity sessions about the potential need for ambassador programs or similar going forward. But for the most part, the responsibility to try to do their best to enforce the rules in the park falls to our full and part-time staff, and then ultimately to our enforcement agencies through LAPD or the park rangers. So I think the answer directly, there's not specifically a position for someone just to enforce the do's and don'ts, but it's a conversation we've been hearing a lot in the park needs assessment process.
Great question. Thanks, Daryl.
Great, thank you. Are community school parks included in the park acquisition chart?
Yes, so glad that somebody brought this up. So community school parks, for anybody that's not familiar, is a typology of park we have where there's a memorandum of understanding between the City Department of Recreation and Parks and a school, that school can be open at certain times of the week to community use, when it doesn't conflict with school use. So those types of parks that already exist are definitely in the classifications that we're doing. And we're also looking at where additional community school parks might meet park needs that have been identified. So there are a lot of ongoing conversations around, are there opportunities to expand memorandum of understanding between, for example, LAUSD and Rec and Parks? Those conversations continue to be ongoing. But I will say that additional schoolyard parks could be a great way to meet some of the needs that I was identifying during the presentation. So I'm glad whoever put that question in there is thinking creatively about our public lands that we have.
Thank you. There is a note about Valley support for public funding at 52%. Survey reported positive response in the Valley for more public financing. Someone should review how much public support really exists by a community of people who vote. Prop K passed in 1996 by one tenth of 1% of votes only.
Yeah, great point. So just to be clear, the statistically valid survey was households around the city, and people did not have to declare if they were eligible to vote to do that or not. And the point that this listener is making is true, that voters are the ones that ultimately make these decisions. Right now, there is a coalition separate from Rec and Parks, but that is thinking about what future measures could be. And I believe that one of the things that they're looking into is considering voters. But as a department in the city of LA, Rec and Parks is surveying all users, not just voters for this.
Thank you. City of LA has a hole in their budget. RAP can help close the hole by not acquiring new land for parks. Why not sell assets to close the budget hole?
Okay, great point about the current budget. The city of Los Angeles is in a deficit, so the 2026 budget, for those that have been following it, has actually led to additional cuts across the city, including cuts to the Department of Recreation and Parks. I think there's a couple of different potential ways to answer this question, and I certainly would invite others to chime in after I give one. Is we are really looking long term, and one of the things that we're endeavoring to do is chart need for parks separate from an annual process so that we can try to do more than a year-to-year planning for that budgeting, which creates a lot of problems for like staff succession planning, et cetera. So when we're looking at funding strategies and what the gaps are, we're not necessarily suggesting that all of that comes directly from the budget. So we're looking at philanthropy, we're looking at other sort of federal and state initiatives and collaborations, as well as county collaborations. We're really trying to not let one year's budget deficit drive this process. But it's not incorrect that we're in deficit right now. One thing that I think we've heard from some others that have sold assets in lean times, because value of land is going up so much in Los Angeles right now, that if we sell lands because we're in a lean period, in the future, the chance of ever getting back to the level that we're at, or even beyond to where we need to be, becomes nearly impossible. The land is one of the best long-term values in the Los Angeles region to really hold on to. So we aren't looking at selling assets to close the budget hole as part of this process currently. That's actually the first time in this few months that I've heard someone suggest that, but we'll certainly add it to the list of feedback. All feedback is welcome. And noted that we are in a deficit.
Thank you. This looks like more of a suggestion. It says to approach the Rams, Chargers, Dodgers, and Lakers to see how they would like to build their fan bases with the City of LA.
Great question. I'm super glad that's, again, somebody's being creative here. One of the interest groups that has been meeting on this project is some of the foundations groups. So like Dodgers Foundation, Clippers Foundation, the Lakers have been thinking about and how to be involved in park systems as well. And so I think one of the things that they're very interested in is how to get young children playing sports, especially in communities that are disadvantaged. So it's a great idea and a really good suggestion. We'll keep pushing on that because I think it's a great thing that's coming together.
Great. If we have a park recommendation or idea, should we first review the assessment, the land assessment your team has done, so we know if the area needs or deserves a park?
Great question. So you don't have to wait. If you have a recommendation of somewhere that you know of, like land, you could certainly drop us an email with it. We're taking and making a list of different parcels that folks have suggested. Some parcels have been investigated and over the years, I don't mean like now, but I mean over the years, different parcels have been investigated. If you have an idea, don't be shy, please send it. But certainly when we finish this mapping, if you know of a parcel that's in one of the areas that's in high need, absolutely, don't hesitate to send that in via email. So it's both and. You don't have to wait, or you can also look when that assessment is ready.
Great. We talked a little bit about this. There's a question about a nonprofit and how a nonprofit would join a technical advisory committee.
So the technical advisory committee is city agencies. So a nonprofit would probably be more applicable to the steering committee. And so if you want to drop an email making that request, please do.
Great. Does the park needs assessment include parks within LA City that are not operated by RAP, such as state and county parks?
Great question. So there are two answers to this question. The answer is, on one hand, is in terms of how we think about walkability and the network of parks, absolutely. Other parks that are managed by the state or the county or the federal government certainly play a role in making our communities better. So when we look at like the overall network of who needs parks, like that park mapping, we are absolutely considering the whole constellation of park systems in that. When we look at like very specific facility needs, we are only looking at City of Los Angeles parks. So for example, if we wanted to evaluate if somebody has a park within a 10-minute walk of their house, we would not discount the fact that they have access to a state or a county facility. When we are looking for how much money, for example, in the budget the city needs to operate its parks, we are only looking at city parks. So there's a little bit of both in there.
Great. What is the best way to follow along for future meetings and surveys? Is there an email list, for example? Yes.
Yes.
On our
Even
website.
Christina's like, yeah. So if you go to the website and you're just on the homepage, which is chock full of cool things and like new videos and stuff go up and it's so fun. If you scroll all the way down, you can see a lot of dates in here. But then you can sign up for project updates. So if you want to get emails, I'll just pretend like I'm doing this right now. You can sign in your email and you can hit submit, and that will add you to the project list update. And we really hope that everybody will do that.
Great. Is every park required to have services for the unhoused? Some park staff inevitably have to provide services and support given the need.
Okay, I'm gonna also make sure Lauren, if maybe speak up and help me on this one. Every park is not required to have services for the unhoused. Some do, and increasingly, a lot of during emergencies and in special conditions, park staff do get called on as basically like the front face of the city, whether that's helping with the unhoused or fire response or the COVID pandemic response. So some park staff definitely do end up providing those services. Lauren, do you have anything you want to add or expand on this?
Just a little bit. And Jessica, everything you said was correct. So that answers the baseline of the question. And I do think it is really worth recognizing that many people who are working within park facilities or working at parks are taking on, multiple jobs when they are doing that, right? Like many folks are operating as social workers, as people to connect to resources, whether that's within the job description or not. So we have been talking to Rec and Parks to understand like how can there be more support for RAP employees through both how what resources are provided within parks and also how that is really being kind of like communicated to park staff and how they're being supported because, as we all know, parks cannot solve the housing crisis that we do have in Los Angeles, but that housing crisis is very visible within park spaces in our city. So that's certainly something that's at the front of mind as we are talking with RAP and creating this PNA to talk, to really think about those issues in LA.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
How does this park needs assessment relate to the county's park needs assessment and park needs assessment plus? Does it build upon the data, methodologies, and analysis done as part of those studies?
Yes, this person is really following their government, and I love it. I failed to mention when I pulled up this slide, so I just pulled it up when I saw this was the next question in the Q&A. The LA County PNA is actually really foundational to this. So many of you might be familiar that in 2016, the County of LA did the 2016 Parks Needs Assessment, and that established several things. It established a methodology around walkability, which we are still using. It also established a methodology around ranking every year the park's physical condition. So since 2016, City of Los Angeles has participated in that program, providing the county with those annual updates. All of that gets rolled into here. So we're not reinventing the wheel with the City of Los Angeles Parks Needs Assessment, but we're diving into more specificity. It's also, at this point, 9 years later, so some of the facilities, have changed since. So we're sort of layering in additional decision-making tools and additional community feedback for that information. The other thing that the county released in 2021 or 2022 was the Parks Needs Assessment Plus, which really heavily looked at rural areas of the county as well. So these different pieces are really layering together, and we actually believe we will be using in the draft that comes out in September the LA County P&A as one of the key site-based evaluation framework components. I love that person knows to ask that question. Great question.
Who is in charge of cleaning parks? I wanted to know if there would be programs such as volunteering to clean up the parks and waterways. I've seen the river in the Sepulveda Basin and it appears dirty even for the animals.
Great question. So there's different answers to, well, first of all, the Rec and Parks maintenance staff is in charge of cleaning in City of Los Angeles recreation and park sites. It can be a little confusing because some park sites, for example, like the Sepulveda Basin that was mentioned here, has areas of it that are taken care of by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or LA Sanitation or the LA County Flood Control District. So depending on the specific park or location, it might have a different jurisdiction. But by and large, for the City of Los Angeles parks, it is the RAP maintenance team. Through the years, I didn't say this during the presentation, but might be worth mentioning, Rec and Parks full-time staff peaked around 2008 at around 2,000 people. Today, the Rec and Park staff is down closer to 1,500. Part-time staff peaked around 10,000 and is down just to a few thousand today. So it's a true statement, and we've heard this from communities, that the ability for the recreation and parks maintenance staff to keep up, it has been limited by those staffing cuts. And that's one of the sort of calculations we're looking at right now is what would it take to get staff back up to the levels of more restroom cleaning or having rec centers open on other days has been another one that has come up. So there are volunteers days. So there are ways that you can volunteer at your local park. I would definitely recommend getting in touch with your local park recreation coordinator if you're at a park that has staff. They would be the best person for very localized. There are also a lot of nonprofits, such as Friends of the Los Angeles River and Heal the Bay, that do quarterly cleanups. There's a really great quarterly cleanup along the Los Angeles River that usually has a Sepulveda Basin site that FOLAR usually does, the Great River Cleanup, usually in June. I think June's. So yeah, really would love to see people getting out there and coordinating. Another way that you can get involved is a lot of parks in the city have park advisory boards, PABs, and you can reach out to your PAB, and sometimes they will have those types of opportunities to volunteer or to clean up, or through your neighborhood council or council district.
Okay, thank you for the informative presentation. I heard you discuss many different concerns and how you are addressing them. I didn't hear very much around park safety. How is this being addressed? For example, at my local park, I often see drug deals occurring, MLK and Western Avenue. Is this something Rec and Parks can address, or can this be addressed with law enforcement? Do you work closely with law enforcement?
Great question. I'll start on this one, and then Lauren or Daryl, feel free to chime in if you have others to add. Safety has been a really big component of what we've been looking at, both the actual statistics of what's happening in a neighborhood, but also perceived safety in some of our different neighborhoods. I also live in South LA, not too far from MLK and Western, so I feel what this person is commenting on here. Rec and Parks does coordinate very closely with the LAPD. In fact, they're represented on the technical advisory committee and have been piloting some ways to think about safety at parks. There's a couple of pilot sites that they are looking at around the city. It would be cool if that could expand to other sites as well. There is a park ranger program, but they are not like law enforcement in the sense that they're not armed. So when there is something illicit happening that's beyond, basic issues, the rangers do call the LAPD. And obviously there aren't enough rangers in the current system to be at every park all the time. So generally speaking, the type of issue that this person is mentioning does fall to law enforcement. It's an ongoing dialogue and an ongoing thing. I think enforcement in our city across the board is something that we've heard concerns about. So we've been flagging that as we've been doing this assessment. There are some other ways, in addition to just law enforcement, though, such as, better lighting has come up with a lot of conversations with people, like how can we improve and enhance lighting to make it safer in some of the areas around our parks, for example. Other sort of crime prevention through environmental design strategies.
Similar to first mile, last mile funding for public transportation, could that be taken into account to increase park access? My local park is less than a mile away, but traffic safety is a concern.
Yeah. So actually, let's start at the beginning. For those that are less familiar with first mile, last mile funding, typically associated with public transportation, basically encompassing how you get to a transit stop, whether that be a bus or a train stop, and how you get home after you get off of a bus or a train. And there is a lot of funding associated with that, not only locally through something like Measure M, but really state and federal funding as well. So when we think about park access and mobility, coordinating that with Metro and others is really, I think, a significant opportunity in the coming years. One of the things that has been brought up by several folks is like, I live close, but it's too dangerous to walk there, so I end up getting in my car anyway. And so how do we slow folks down? It's certainly a great idea. I don't have like a home run answer to this yet, but something that's a great idea to continue coordinating as we think about our parks.
Thank you. Why not use pre-screened and ethics trained neighborhood council members to become park monitors?
That's a great question. Great idea. I think that that's the kind of thing when Daryl was saying we've been talking about ambassadors, monitors, whatever they might be called. Are there opportunities for that? Great idea. Potentially. I mean, to be continued. Yeah.
Are tree and tree canopy coverage at parks analyzed as part of the study? How can we get more trees and shade at our parks?
I'm so glad. I couldn't have asked a better question if I had planned it myself. I promise I didn't ask that question. If you go to the website and you go to this tab at the top called Find a Park, you can actually look at different parks in the park system, and you can look at this data. So for example, I'm going to go to a park in South LA here called St. James, just as an example. You can click on it. It will tell you what the classification of that park is, how big it is. It will tell you what the condition of the rest of the amenities there. In this case, it only has a restroom. It's in poor condition. You can use the My LA 311 here to report additional issues. It will show you the location, the year established, and it will show you the percentage of tree canopy. So this is 20% tree canopy, and 25% of those trees are native species. So this is brand new. We added the shade coverage maybe a few months ago, and then the native coverage has just been very recently completed along with that year established data. So happy to see that. And definitely shade and trees are one of the biggest issues. And if you look around the city, you can see a big need in several communities for additional shade, especially as the climate continues to heat.
Is there going to be a recording of the meeting sent out? Yes, we are recording this meeting and it will be posted on our website, likely later this week or next week. And then if you are on our email list, we will send out an e-blast with links to all of these resources, including a recording of the meeting once it's uploaded.
Great. Thanks, Christina. It's exciting.
Why is there artificial turf in our parks when it is extremely harmful to the health and environment?
That's a great question. It has a lot of layers to it. I'm not an artificial turf person necessarily myself, so I don't want to be the spokesperson for it. I think right now we've heard a lot of feedback from communities that would really like to have a lot more natural grass fields. Right now, there are a lot of folks that are interested in the ability for artificial turf to take more intensive use in a given period of day, where grass needs a rest period. But these are some of the things that are ongoing conversation. There's not a single answer in one way or another, but I appreciate this person's feedback that they are against artificial turf.
Have you looked at the opportunities to depave, remove concrete at schools and parks to create more space for tree planting?
Great question. We've been looking at the land cover data and asking if we need quite as much pavement in some of these areas. So I think it's a great question, a great idea, an ongoing discussion. I think we'll make sure that that's. I couldn't agree more, but I'm a landscape architect, and as you guys probably can already tell from my personal bend, I love trees and plants and depaving, but I recognize that we have a lot of other needs too that make use of some of those other spaces as well.
Okay. How can parks procedures be more transparent and involve the community? CFAC has concerns about destructive brush clearance and trees planted without input from neighbor groups and councils. The community groups were ignored when the children's arboretum was destroyed and over-aggressive brush clearance, and also when the trees planted in Rhodes Park and other parks.
That's a good question. How can they be more transparent and involve the community? Destructive pledge trees. I think, well, first, I just want to validate that this person's concern that sometimes it's not always transparent what's happening is something that we've heard and we've noted. I'm sorry to hear that there was destructive clearing. There is a RAP board of commissioners, so Rec and Parks is overseen by a board of 5 non-staff. They are just regular citizens. They meet twice a month on the first and third Thursdays around the city at different parks facilities. It is a Brown Act committee, so you can see the public agenda and you can attend, and you can also give public comment. I recognize that it's difficult to give public comment if you didn't know that something was going to be occurring. I would probably recommend reaching out to either the regional superintendent or the park supervisor in this case. But I think that it's a question I don't have a great answer for in this time, unless anyone else wants to chime in and add. But I would absolutely recommend checking in on some of those resources.
Okay. This is a continuation of that. Additionally, Beverly Hills has just banned new installations of artificial turf and is phasing out existing artificial turf. How can we do this for our parks since artificial turf is not sustainable and requires expensive replacement with no good way of disposing of used material? There are viable alternatives that are natural.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of cities are phasing out artificial turf and looking at hybrids. It's definitely one of the things that's going to be listed in this assessment as a potential strategy forward.
In response to an earlier question, parkland cannot just be sold. They are protected by the Park Preservation Act and potentially other restrictions depending on how the parkland was acquired. It's just
That is
a
correct.
comment. I know Play LA funding is going to end in
Oh,
2020.
wait, in case somebody
sure.
just joined us.
Sure. Yep.
We are not recommending in this needs assessment to sell off portions of parkland.
I know Play LA funding is going to end in 2028, but have there been mentions of potential legacy foundation supporting parks? For context, the LA 84 Foundation was started during the last time the Olympics were in LA.
Yeah, great question. There are a ton of conversations happening around the city about the LA 2028 Olympics and what could be legacy elements of that. One thing I will say that's a little different about LA 2028, as I think a lot of you on the call tonight know, is it's a little bit different in how it was set up. The city itself is not running the LA 2028 games. An entity called LA 2028 is. They are the entire pitch was a no build Olympics, so they aren't building like brand new stadiums, for example. So there are a lot of community groups and efforts that are coming together to think about what might be possible. And of course, Rec and Parks is one of the city departments that has to review and approve some of those proposals from LA 2028. But one of the things, certainly additional legacy support is something that I think everyone's very interested in.
Okay. Is there an incentive to bring beach-specific transportation to inland areas? Some cities in LA County have been able to achieve this, but this hasn't been adopted by all districts.
Good question. I don't know the answer to this. If anyone else on the team knows if there's incentives to bring beach-specific transportation to inland areas, we can put a flag on that one, and maybe if somebody else on the team can speak to that, I'm not sure. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I'll send it back to you, Christina.
Okay. Thank you for sharing survey results with infographics, which are easy to understand. Will you be publicly sharing the raw data, Excel forms, acknowledging that some of the data would be redacted to maintain anonymity?
We are going to share in a few weeks once we finish the crosstabs of data, which will give more of the data where folks were asking to see some of the crosstabs, like a demographic crossed with a certain council district or something like that, for example. So that will be shared. The extent of whether or not that would answer this person's question, I guess, is I'm not sure, but that will be another thing that folks can look forward to. Because we did have a lot of questions about the cross-tabbing.
Okay. Our Pocket Park Dearborn is not staffed, and large parties and amplified music are not allowed in spite of current signage. None of these rules are followed. Our neighborhood has been waiting for over 7 years for our park rules to be enforced. Is anyone in RAP capable of solving this problem?
I think enforcement, not only at Rec and Parks facilities, but generally is holistically is challenging to not only our cities, but a lot of cities. I think that, just to be totally frank right now, I think there are 40 park rangers and 70 total positions. I think many are not filled. So the ability for Rec and Parks to solve it in the short term is probably quite limited. But I think one of the things that we're really trying to do in this needs assessment is to outline those gaps in things like rangers and park ambassadors, to be able to be more responsive to comments like this.
Considering ice raids have occurred at parks, what would be the best way to suggest safety measures and protocols to protect community members trying to visit City of LA parks?
Yeah, I should, I think it's worth mentioning, appreciate this person asking this question. It's been a really tumultuous June. And, we've seen it as we've been in different neighborhoods around the city of folks that are nervous to come out and nervous to visit facilities. Several council districts as well as park facilities are posting resources and sharing resources for that. And it's specifically some council districts have been really active in trying to suggest safety measures. I don't think that on this particular call, this team, that I'm prepared to suggest what those are, but they are certainly coming down from the mayor's offices and the council offices, as we've seen from the mayor right now. Daryl, I don't know if there's anything to add from RAP's side about any sort of guidance or training that current rec professionals are being given from RAP in terms of what is happening.
This is Daryl. So I guess just what I'd say to the community members is that if you go to our website, www.laparks, I think it's still .org, you should see at the very beginning kind of a drop-down banner that talks about making sure immigrant communities and all communities know their rights. You should see a little link there. And actually, it'll link back through some of the other resources in the city. It's just a broad way of saying that the city is obviously taking direct measures to sort of make sure information is available, that folks have different access to the city's policies. As everyone, I think people know there's certain ordinances that guide what we can and cannot do and how programs are done. But I'd encourage you, if you have those kind of questions, is certainly to take advantage of those resources, and you'll hopefully see that the city is kind of speaking with direct voice.
Thank you. There is a comment here. Please elevate the Aliso Creek Pocket Park off Chase Street behind Napa Street Elementary to full recreation park status. It is heavily used by local stakeholders, currently being monitored and supported by Northridge South Neighborhood Council. RAP status should help get regular cleaning at this park without calling for cleanup assistance.
Great note. Thank you for that. We'll take a look at that.
I just have a few more questions here before we wrap up. How do park advisory boards function? What is their role, and where can I find more information?
Great question. On the laparks.org website that Daryl just so lovely mentioned, there is a piece about park advisory boards. This is I think all the things that you need to know here and the history of them and their values. I just put this link in the chat, so you can check it out. Not every park has a park advisory board, but they can be requested through the Board of Park Commissioners for parks that have staff. So check it out at that link.
Great. Regarding safety, has the Los Angeles County Office of Violence Prevention been involved in addressing community-based violence prevention solutions at LA City Parks?
Good question. I personally don't know the answer to that. We can make a flag of that and see, or if anyone else on the call knows the answer to that. If the LA County Office of Violence Prevention has been involved. You know what? We'll make a flag of that. We'll take it back to the group at Rec and Parks that's working on that category stuff and think about it and look at it. I don't know. Sorry. I have to say I don't know on a couple of these.
Okay. I love that tree canopy data is now part of the information for each park. Is there a possibility to add the percentage of permeable paving?
I love that idea, and we should certainly flag it as a future goal. Currently, we do not have the data for permeable paving percentages across the board, but great flag, exactly the kind of thing that as we advance our systems would be cool to have in the future.
Okay. Has Recreation and Parks considered developing parks with fruit trees like LA County has done in the South Bay at Del Air Park?
Um, Certainly there are some parks that have fruit trees. So, you know, the extent to which that would be continuing in the future or not, I guess, is something we'll be curious to hear from communities if it's of interest or not.
Okay. There is a newly finished rail-to-rail bike and walking path in South LA. Was it counted in the park space acreage?
Does this person know the specific name of that facility? If they could maybe follow up with that, we can check on it. I don't know for the 16,000 acres. I wouldn't speak to that off the top of my head, but happy to check.
Oh, hey, Jessica, it's Daryl. Just maybe to answer the question, if the person speaking about the new project that Metro just did, the rail to rail along Slauson, then the answer is no because it's Metro property. But like Jessica noted, if you can got some more information just to confirm, that would be super helpful.
Thanks, Daryl.
Okay. The RAP Commission is a good place to vent, but we are frustrated with how RAP functions. It is hard to vote more taxes when we are worried as how the people running RAP will use it in a way that makes the investment worth it. Laurel Grove Park was recently refused trash cans because they got stolen. Why not find a way to keep them from getting stolen?
Fair question. Trash cans being stolen is a concern. I will say, I know there's a lot to be said about the Department of Rec and Parks over the years. My experience as a consultant working with Rec and Parks right now and the group that is currently working to manage and steward the future of the system is really working tirelessly and kind of remarkable for the level of staffing available. So I hope the whatever the experiences that this person has, that they won't hold it against the whole Parks Department. But thank you for that note, and we will certainly make it a part of our report out because we recognize that it's important to trust that those that are stewarding the resources are stewarding them well.
Great. Those
As
were
we
all.
wrap
Oh,
up, can I
sorry.
just,
Oh, go
sorry,
ahead. Go
I
ahead.
just want to give one more plug for the website before we wrap up, and then I'll turn it back to you, Christina, to shut us down here. I know we're 1 minute over. But I really hope folks will check out the Find a Park. And I heard already that the Technical Advisory Committee meeting date will be updated tomorrow will be updated on here and some other things. So please do check out the website and find your park and take a look.
There is someone that has their hand raised. I'm not sure if that was inadvertent or if they would like to be unmuted. I have unmuted. I have unmuted you. Okay, maybe not.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining tonight. If you didn't get to ask your question, you want to drop us an email, please feel free to, and we'll do our best to answer it. And thanks everybody for coming out. I think Sarah put in a resource about the county beach bus initiative as well. So thank you, Sarah, for that information. Awesome.
Thank
I hope
you.
everybody will continue to follow the Parks Needs Assessment. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.